Welcome to Cyber909, your source for wit and wisdom in cybersecurity and beyond. On this podcast, your host, Veteran Chief Security Officer and cyber aficionado Den Jones, taps his vast network to bring you guests, stories, opinions, predictions, and analysis you won't get anywhere else. Join us for Cyber909 episode 15 with Jake Bernardes.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of Cyber909 and our adventure into the world of podcasting. And each episode, I try and dig up some exciting guests. And I've got Jake Bernardes. He is one of my friends from our CSO Society group. There's a lot of CISOs hiding out in there. And also, though, he's the host of the Risking It All podcast, and he's a seasoned multi-CISO. So, Jake, welcome to the show. And why don't you introduce yourself so I don't screw it up anymore?
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I host a podcast myself, Risking It All in Life, which is similar, I suppose, to this one, but focused more around the people and topics that underpin people rather than anything security or leadership related. We often talk about diversity, neurodiversity, what leadership means, that kind of stuff. I am the CSO at Anecdotes, which is a GRC automation platform aimed for enterprises. Prior to that, I've been a CISO at a number of places. I also hold a few advisory and fractional CISO roles and try and keep my hand in as many different places as possible because our industry has got so broad that it's the only way to really stay on top of being somewhat relevant.
Yeah, sounds like you're a busy guy. I mean, we will put your LinkedIn profile in on the show notes, and having run through that myself, I was like, I don't know what this guy hasn't done really. Now, I can see behind you that's not a virtual background. That is a real live room, and it's dark outside. So Jake, where are you based? Because sunny for me.
Yeah, I'm based in the north of the UK, in quintessential England. I live near Chatsworth House, which is the house of Pride and Prejudice for those who are literary fans, and in quintessential kind of rolling chocolate box, thatched cottages and black and white architecture and that kind of stuff. But I've lived here and worked in the US for well over a decade now. Also lived and worked in the Far East, in China, in the Middle East, in Jordan. We lived and worked in the US as well for a while. So been around. I think I've seen most continents. I haven't got out to the Arctic and got very cold yet. But yeah, otherwise, definitely don't have the standard sunshine in the background. It's really cold here right now.
Yeah, so yeah, for those that don't know, I'm in sunny California. It is the time of recording just after 9 a.m. For you, that means it's just after 5 p.m. And it's January, which means for me, it's nice and sunny. And for you, it's shit and cold and dark. It gets dark and miserable early on, right?
It got dark about 3:45, I think, today. So I have the double-edged sword of working for an Israeli entity with a strong US presence. As a CISO, I kind of, as every CISO knows, half support the go-to-market motion, half support the product. So I have early morning in Tel Aviv and late night in San Francisco. So it's kind of unescapable at times. The middle of my day is most people's evenings, weirdly.
Well, let's get into that shortly. I'd love, so, from an origin story, right? Why don't you share with people a little bit about the background of Jake? Like, what got you into cyber technology? What was that inspiration? And I'm guessing that was probably a few years ago because you look like you're still 12, which is a blessing, I guess.
I did shave today, but I'm nearly 40. I don't think any CISO or cybersecurity leader has a normal or a standardized story. I just don't think it exists. And I think for me, it's normally abnormal. So I grew up around computers. My dad was big into them. We grew up like building our own PCs. And I remember having an Amstrad where you could flick from the Mega Drive to the PC, which was Windows 3.1 for those who are as old or older than myself. I remember playing with the ZX Spectrum and playing Dizzy the Egg and turning over the cassette. And I remember at those days, not just building stuff, but like wanting to break stuff. Like I always inherently want to try and cheat. Not because I found the games too hard, but because I just wanted to try and do stuff that it wasn't supposed to do. And I think that's all. I think if you find people who are in our industry, that's somehow inbuilt into our nature. Like we want to find a way to break stuff and rebuild it. We want a Lego kit and build the stuff that's not on the picture. So I grew up very much in that mold. I actually ended up at university studying Chinese. So a completely different thing. And then worked in technology at IBM, then on to KPMG, where I spent a lot of time kind of in commercial type technology roles, consulting, deal advisory, kind of that kind of stuff. And then ended up going back into pen testing. I was offered a position and said, do you want to try and see if you can do this hack the box? Because we're trying to look for people to kind of cross over. Did it and found I naturally had a talent for it. I said I'd grown up in computers. Linux wasn't foreign to me. Was able to utilize Kali and able to kind of demonstrate how to do this stuff. Went into pen testing, followed pen testing to consulting. Went from KPMG to NCC Group, which was a massive player in the UK and Europe at the time. Sent me all over the world, all over Europe. And then I famously took a phone call. I have 2 kids. My daughter had just been born. I got a phone call saying, can you do a project? And I said, yeah, sure. Where is it? And it said, a man. And I said, fine. Got off the phone, spoke to my wife, and I don't know where a man is. And I just agreed to a 1-year seconded project in Amman, Jordan, in the Middle East. So ended up going there and spending, quite a while with my wife and 2 kids living in a suite on the Dead Sea, which was nice. And then got straight away sent to the US, firstly to a company in Irvine. So without giving away, a credit checking agency, which isn't hard to Google and work out. And then spent a while in Salt Lake also doing consulting. And I got really into the startup world there. So I became a VC, so going into kind of early stage startups in Silicon Valley, Milpitas, kind of Bay Area type places, Mountain View, helping them build security and compliance programs, trust centers before they existed. And then kind of outing myself to hire them, their first security people, and then rinse and repeat. I did a number of times. I then did a test on a company called MemSQL, now called SingleStore. Hacked the company, sat in the CEO's chair and said, you should probably hire someone to fix your security. I literally picked up a backpack from Starbucks and walked through the door and tailgated. Sat down and said, you should fix them. And they said, yeah, do you want to do it? And that was it. I left consulting, took a security head of role. And from there, I've transitioned from between companies, doing that over and over again. And in the meantime, I do a lot of speaking and podcasting, mainly because I'm probably like yourself, you realize that being opinionated is an art. Like having opinions on things is more relevant than not. And I like to tell stories. So yeah, here I am.
And that's a journey, right? So I think I picked up on the learning Chinese at university. What got you into, of all the languages in the world? Because in Europe, right, normally we'd learn French and German in schools. So what got you into Chinese?
Yeah, it's another random story. We're going on a religiosity tangent here, I'm afraid. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise nicknamed the Mormons. And I actually served a voluntary mission in Germany when I was 20. Spent a couple of years there and learned German almost by accident. That's kind of what you do. You learn it as you live there. And left. I thought I was horrendous at languages at school. Absolutely awful. Failed them. And then worked. Actually, I quite like this learning a language thing. Got quite good at it, and thought I'll go and just do the one that sounds the hardest. So that literally is the honest answer to why I ended up learning Chinese. I picked the hardest language I could think of and decided that would be a good test. Yeah. I think that translates right. I mean, I'm on a tangent already, but that's probably my art. It's a personality trait I think you find in tech, and particularly in cyber again, is this desire just to find something that's hard, a problem that seems unsolvable, and try and solve it. If that's not the way that we're built and the way that we think as security practitioners, then I think we're in the wrong space, because like our lives are pretty much oriented around problems that probably aren't our problems, just became our problems, try and solve them.
Yeah, I mean, as I was planning my career, I'd quite often get assigned the things that people had failed to deliver before. And it was like, give it to Dan, he'll do it. And not that I was, because I tell you what, I would never regard myself as a technically gifted engineer as I was growing up. But I had the ability to find the right people, come up with the right plan, and quite often break the rules. For me, like getting shit done sometimes just meant that I'm not following the same rule playbook as everybody else. Like I didn't. I remember once Adobe asked me to lead service management, and I hated service management. I thought it was bullshit. So for me, it's kind of like I'd love to get you. I kind of know a little bit of your opinion because I've watched your pods, some of your pods. So we'll get into the whole compliance equals security or not thing shortly. But for me, I was like, service management is just someone years and years and years ago, especially when we were doing Sarbanes-Oxley, early 2000s, it was almost like they're reading the book and they're implementing what's in the book rather than we're running a business, what applies from this book that makes sense for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I took it over, I love marketing. Actually, it's funny. I'd say I'm very creative. I've got gear behind me that might suggest I am, but not famously creative because I'm doing this job and I'm not playing gigs and flying around the world in my helicopter and private jet. So my music's not that good. But the one thing for me, I look at like the kind of curiosity is vitally important in our gig. I also think that being a little bit of a rule breaker, like you said, like you're gaming, right? It's like when you're tinkering with computers and you're seeing a game, you're like, okay, how can I break this? How can I circumvent this? How can I do something that's not meant to do?
Yeah.
Social engineering. I love DEF CON and the social engineering village. I think for me, that's always an inspiring place to go and sit for a few hours.
So that was my specialty, was a social engineer as a pen tester. I was never really into kind of infra testing. I became quite good at manipulating people, at reading, understanding what the situation was, whether that's from getting a colleague who's female to have a pregnant belly and walk through a room because everyone opens the door for them. So I've done live stuff before at various security conferences where we've hacked people on stage based on their social media, done all that kind of stuff. I find that's a fascinating one because it's like tech is tech. Anything is breachable with time. But the real interest in elegance is like, how can you break people? I think that's where it becomes a really interesting point.
Yeah. And you know, most people, I say this all the time, like most people have a desire to be helpful, to do the right thing. And then there's also the when under duress and stress, then how do they behave and what will they do? Because sometimes that's the
Yeah, I've done some terrible things in my time where we've internally fished the CEO who had a pregnant wife, and I've like faked the hospital that his wife happened to be visiting to like say she'd been rushed into emergency care just to see if you put them in that point of inflection, how malleable do individuals become? I mean, when you really think about it, it's pretty dark, but that's the reality of the criminal world that we actually face off against, is that they don't have those ethical dilemmas that we often do.
Well, maybe some point we get you back on the pod and we just dig into the darker side of life, because I think that could be a fascinating conversation.
May love to. I said the human psyche and how to manipulate it is something which really fascinates me.
So, and I realized this morning, I was like, shit, if we had an Irish person on the show today, that would be cool, because I grew up learning all these jokes, which was like Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman jokes. I don't know about you, right? But I always got those jokes. I'm like, fuck, that would have been a great little pod. We could just come up with these. We could just share a couple of these jokes every now and again that we grew up learning. Probably half of them are not politically correct any longer, actually.
I think they'd be cancelled. I'll be honest.
Yeah, we'd be cancelled in the first half hour. So one thing, you've shared a few things in pods and on LinkedIn and stuff. So let's talk about the governance, because you do work for a governance company, right? So why don't you share a little bit? What does Anecdotes do? What's their MO?
Anecdotes is GRC automation. So this isn't new. Like you've got well-known brands in the SME space, like your Drata, Vanta, Secure Frame, who kind of allow you to connect applications and systems to a single point, in this case, the application, which then translates those into how they meet with SOC 2 or ISO 27001 or various compliance frameworks, right? Get rid of this problem that you have where you have to go and take a screenshot and show how you do it. You answer a question, it's automating the process. What Anecdotes has done is taken a concept like that, but designed it for enterprise. So where most of those struggle to go up market because of various security requirements, whether that's around flexibility or customization of the platform or securely written APIs. So all our APIs are custom, they're not open APIs, or around the fact of how you actually take that data and actually present it as real data. So rather than just a green tick, here's the data, here's the JSON that shows that evidence, which then allows us to go point to point. So from, let's say your auditor is a Shellman or a Weaver, just because they're both integrated to the platform. You can take it straight from your application from AWS, GCP, whatever it might be, Wiz, all the way through into their audit portal, which would be audit source or field guide in this instance, straight through to the audit, meaning you never had to do that whole painful thing of answering 250 questions and grabbing the screenshots. It's about automating that process. But then it's about going deeper than that. So where a lot of people stop there, Anecdotes that says, well, actually, we've now got this data, this raw data that shows how we comply to these requirements. What else can we learn from that? Like, how can we use that to understand deeper what we're doing as a business, what we're doing from a security, compliance, and GRC stance, and actually mature on that, build custom requirements, build custom approaches, like interrogate the data in a way that other people can't. So it's really, I mean, I was a customer first a couple of times. So it was always of interest to me because I think the space is fascinating, but it's a different twist and angle on it, a different philosophy. And I always find that an interesting place.
Yeah. And having been a customer, what do you think? I'm sure they pull you in because you mentioned this about the go-to-market, and we can get into that shortly. But what would you say is an ideal customer? What makes a good customer for Anecdotes?
Ideal customer, cloud first, utilizing a solid and normalized text, like I say. So when you've got vendors that everyone's heard of, right, the Wizzes, the GCPs, the AWSs, the cloud security platforms, whether it's Tenable or Sneak, or like stuff that people know, Okta, Jump Cloud. I think that one. Yeah. I think people who have already compliance requirements, so they have stuff around SOC, ISO, whatever it might be, PCI, FedRAMP, HIPAA, but they also have a desire to get more deep into that. It's not just a checkbox exercise. It's a how do we become better? I think that's where Anecdotes really plays. It's have the right tech stack, have the right requirements, and have the right mindset. And then size-wise, it's really, like I said, mid-market enterprise. So anything from like 1,000 on the very bottom end. Our sweet spot's probably around 5,000 people with a decent size security and GRC team. Then we tend to always make people's lives better, quote unquote.
Better. Yeah, it's an interesting market. I've got some friends that have their own companies that are playing in the GRC space. It's a fascinating market. It's a congested market, though. I mean, I look at it like there's a lot of players, and as a buyer, I think it's pretty hard for buyers to digest and understand like which one of the myriad of options out there makes sense for them. Now, in your role, so I was the CSO at Banyan Security. Then they were acquired by Sonic Wall, so I was the CSO there for a little stint, and I actually really enjoyed. I mean, it was a really small company. I'd just gone from Cisco with a team of 300, a huge budget, all the way down to this little dinky startup, right? And as you know, in this world, it's like you're grabbing for resources here and there, and you're kind of making things work. But you're doing, like, I ran security, I ran IT, but then I was also part of that go-to-market. I was also advising the executives on the strategy for how to sell to CISOs as well. So what is it that you like the most in this role? Is it the speaking with customers and prospects and getting out and about and doing the go-to-market stuff? Or is it the trying to like make sure you're not getting the 3 a.m. phone call on a Friday?
I think I've spent enough time in SaaS security that it's hard for me not to answer the former. Look, I get out of bed to build security and IT and compliance functions that work, but I get out of bed to build ones that automate themselves, not just by technology, but by people as well, that scale and work and function and can test and kind of can survive the resilience tests. But what excites me is, yeah, definitely the strategic stuff that go to market, but it's both sides of that coin. It's like, it's the conversation right now around AI, like what do we build? Like what do people really want? And if you look at the conversation we've had a lot recently, so you look at SolarWinds and Tim Brown, who I've met a couple of times, right? He is still standing up in the SEC for the fact he has parts of a security policy that was public that he can't prove that he was keeping, or they can prove he wasn't. So I said, well, look, let's take policies and let's dump them in Anecdotes and be able to show how, on an automated fashion, how and where we are complying to each control in that, and then advise on the ones we're not, what people should do, or they should remove from their policy. Right? That's interesting stuff where I'm able to be involved in the strategic vision of what does the product become. And the second side, of course, like I enjoy, like there's a stress and a pain in sales, but I think there's something also quite enjoyable about it, right? In seeing that firstly, you can portray and convey a message in a way that resonates and that people grab to, but also to see that process through to the point that actually they go, you know what, we thought the project works. It actually solves the problem. Like there's something in that process end to end, which is somewhat addictive. And so I think, I love the go-to-market stuff and being involved in that. It's definitely a part of what brings me into these companies.
And I mean, I'm kind of similar. I mean, I look at it like the whole, let's run the security stuff. I mean, I love that. Automation, building I think a lot of people think if they automate themselves out of a job, then they don't have a job. Whereas I'm the absolute opposite. I'm like, if you automate yourself out of a job, then you tend to be given more bigger, better jobs.
I think there's two parts to that. I think, firstly, I agree wholeheartedly. And I've always told my team, look, I pay you on what you do. If you do it in 12 hours or 2 hours, I don't care. Like, I pay you on what you do. So solve the problem in a smarter way and go snowboard. I couldn't care less. Or we'll find something better for you to tackle or something more interesting. But also, there's this fear which people just don't understand. It's like AI is going to get rid of us all. The complexities of AI implementations are not going to get rid of us all. They're going to just drive software engineers into more API-focused development. Like the reality is we both come from a small island, which at some point had a massive power over huge parts of the globe. Now, we also see multiple industrial revolutions happen inside of the UK. Like you look at near me, the cotton, when the cotton mills were mechanized, everyone thought everyone would be out of work and that would be the end of industry and the whole of the north of England would starve to death. It didn't happen, right? What they did is actually found new roles and new positions and new industries for those people to leverage into. The same happened when coal collapsed. The same happened when factories mechanized the first time, right? The same happened when the internet came, or you keep going through these. Like the reality is that survival is not about forcing or proving your relevance. Survival is about finding the next thing that demonstrates your value. Well, I said that's the same way I found it as a CISO. Yeah, I can build and secure parts of the internal organization. But when I want a pay rise or I want to prove or value or evidence my value, I'm going to talk about the sales cycles I sped up, the pipeline I brought in, the customers I helped retain, the ARR I helped deliver. Like those are things that you find that you can identify. Where can I show value regardless of what my role is or what else is enforced? Like security is getting more and more automated, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a relevance as a role.
Yeah. And I mean, I do a lot of coaching and we have similar conversations. You know, there's two things. One is, how did you help the business move faster? And how did you help the business make money?
Yeah.
And when companies are selling to these businesses, I always try and tell the sales people, like, stop trying to tell them about how your stuff is better than the other stuff. Start to share with them how you can save money. Because the features and functions, you might want to check that they meet your minimum requirement. But at the end of the day, these features and functions across 10 different vendors could be quite similar. If you go in there with the conversation and you're like, hey, if you partner with us, first of all, use the words like partner. If you partner with us, we can help save you money here, here, and here. We can help this consolidation. We can help reduce these operational costs. Oh, and at the same time, we happen to reduce your risk. I mean, and a good CISO who knows how to be a good buyer will understand the importance of that stuff.
I mean, that's always the question, right? If I'm buying a product, my question is, what problem are you helping me solve? And how are you helping me solve it? And if the answer is technology, this is just cooler because it's better, bigger, faster, stronger, I want to know, like, are you helping me free up people's time to do something else? Are you helping me to basically automate? Are you helping me to increase our efficacy or impact on the wider business by integrating with more parts or processes across the business? Like, what are you doing for me and my team? And I think you're right. Like, if a good buyer doesn't have that skill set, then they're just buying based off what the latest fad is. And at that point, you end up with a ton of tools that aren't properly implemented and aren't really doing anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now, I wanted to dig into this compliance equaling security or not equaling security. What's your take on that little debate?
They're different things. They're totally different things, and they always will be for me. I don't think anyone is less or more important than the other. That's the part where I'm strong, and I think people disagree with me frequently and tell me security is what matters and compliance doesn't, because the reality, that's just not true. I think compliance is, Babel, right? The translation thing that you can speak into a language. I think compliance is to a degree able for security to speak to buyers or investors or the stakeholders. And let me give that context. Compliance is sales enablement. That's the truth. And it is for every business, not just for security companies who have to say we're SOC and ISO certified. Everyone does. You want to sell services, healthcare needs to be HIPAA certified. You want to sell the US government, you need to be FedRAMP certified. You want to sell payment services, you need to be PCI certified. There is all, and outside of tech completely, there's ISO 9001 for quality standards. Like there's so many compliance standards. What it does is demonstrate that you've done crap. You've done stuff that people can understand in a single document they can take and ingest and go, yes, box ticked, whatever the hell you want to say it. It's sales enablement. That's what compliance is. Compliance and security are different things. Security is about how do I stop me getting hacked? How do I protect the business to make sure that the cyber insurance policy I just signed, that I stand up to what I said I'm going to sign up to? Like, how do I protect the people, the process, and the technology of this business that I'm responsible for? Compliance is how do I help sales in any, like not just tech and not security, how do I help them go to market? How do I make sales cycles faster and more efficient? They're different things. Like you look at a trust center, which is probably the epitome of compliance. Yes, it's a representation of your security posture, but it's not. Its purpose is nothing to do with security. Its purpose is to enable procurement. Like we have to be able to understand, and I think so many CISOs get tangled in knots with this whole thing. The reality is they are both different. They are both important. Yes, there is some integration, some intertwining, some overlap, but they have completely different purposes.
Yeah, and totally agree. Do you see? So I think of compliance as exactly you said it. It's really the build confidence. It's let people know that you're doing certain things which are depended upon. I also know a lot of programs where they get the SOC 2, but literally the quality of the auditor isn't that great. And
right, we're in a different conversation then, and we could go for a long time. So I put some LinkedIn posts out recently, and I will continue to do so, saying that I think SOC 2 is now too wide. It should be more expensive and harder to get because it's become completely meaningless. Like there are vendors who they're telling it. If you look at like the world that we've been brought into, the SOC in a box, if you've seen my posts and comments about it, like this idea that you can now get a platform and a vendor to do a SOC for like 10 grand. It's killing our industry because that person has such little time and such little value to make profitability as an auditor that they are giving junior people minimal hours to check stuff which they don't really understand. Like, and you're then getting no value. That SOC 2 is meaningless. So like then people are devaluing the SOC 2 and saying it matters for nothing. I'm like, well, it does matter. But the reality is that the person that tested it and the things they've tested mean that now that one specifically doesn't matter. I like we need to try and change this. And I think it's happening, but it's taking time.
I think, and I think that's interesting because we do this, right? We help companies achieve their SOC or their ISO or whatever they're chasing. But the price point for us to make it worth our time to do it, like we'll do our piece of the puzzle, but we're acting on the client's behalf. We're still bringing in the auditor. We're still going to bring in the pen tester if you need to do a pen test. We're still helping them if they need to fix things in their security program in order to achieve it. I think there's different players in the game. They'll do a different quality job, but at the end of the day, people just want to get SOC to lowest price. Like a lot of vendors, they don't care if the SOC 2 quality was brilliant. They just want the badge, right? So I agree. I think a lot of this compliance stuff. I mean, in the industry, this is where checkbox compliance or checkbox security for me is kind of ruining the game a little bit. Now you mentioned something that got me thinking. So insurance, cyber insurance. In your experience, do you have any guidance for people that are looking to obtain cyber insurance? Like what's your take there?
Gosh, look, I'm known for opinions, and I'm not going to back down from them. I think cyber insurance isn't worth the paper it's written on. You have to have it because if you can't, it's the cost of doing business. You can't go and sell to a KPMG or a ServiceNow or a major tier 1 bank if you don't have cyber insurance, right? You've got no chance. But the reality is, I don't know anyone who's ever successfully claimed against cyber insurance, because every time something happens, somehow there's always something you didn't do right. Look at, like, let's go back to SolarWinds, Tim Brown, SEC, or let's go to Joey Sullivan, Uber, two really famous people I've had interactions with recently. Like, both of them got caught for a single instance of a voluminous like procedure. But you can't have everything right all the time. It's not possible. Yeah. And cyber insurance will always find that one time that you didn't do it, and therefore it's null and void. So yes, you have to have it, and yes, you have to answer their questions to get it, and you have to demonstrate security posture. And is it helpful to be able to do that in a specific and certain way? Yes, but the reality is, like, cyber insurance is probably like any other type of insurance. They will fight tooth and nail to not pay you a dime, and they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, I lump that in with the, like, your car insurance, like your house insurance, like any insurance. And then I also lump that in with a lot of founders and CEOs don't want to spend the money on cybersecurity and IT. So sometimes the role of a CISO, I think, is getting a little more concerning these days, because, and I've had this conversation with CEOs about the role of a CISO. And actually, Tyler, another CSO Society member, friend of mine, he done an article recently, and we had the conversation in the podcast about just the role of the CEOs and how, well, the role of the CISOs and how the CEOs aren't really enabling CISOs to do their job. So where do you see? I mean, you're a CISO, you're a virtual CISO or fractional CISO. Where do you see the evolution of our role in the industry in the next 5 years?
I think there's two parts to that. So I think there's a lot of noise right now about the fact that CISOs will die out. I think that's nonsense. I think there's always going to need to be someone in that chair. I think maybe the role and scope of it changes. Maybe it becomes someone who becomes like an internal advisor, almost like a legal counsel to the business on terms of what you should do and how you should approach things, and security gets interwoven throughout the business. Well, I've worked at a lot of startups. I've had conversations in the last few days, as I do every January, that this year we've got to do more with less. Targets are higher, budgets are down, right? Every time. And it's not just me, it comes across the business. So I think that you can throw your toys at the pram and start to say, look, I don't get the money to do what I need to do. I don't have enough, and therefore it's all your fault, Mr. CEO. You're an idiot, blah, 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 right? The reality is that just can't be true. Part of the conversation we started having is you have to be smarter in trying to find creative solutions to problems. And if you have less budget, your question to the CEO should be, how much do I have? Okay, fine, it's X, whatever that is, less or more than you expected. What are your priorities for IT, security, compliance, GRC? And what do you expect from me? If I fill those three things, I've fulfilled my requirement. Those were documented, hopefully. And that conversation said, this is what I'm supposed to do. I did it. The second part of this problem is the fact that CISOs have an ego issue right now. So there weren't CISOs really 10 years ago. Like the first one you're talking about, like mid-noughties. And we've grown up from being managers to being C-level executives like this. You look at the common route for like a CRO, how many rungs of the ladder have they got to go through? A CMO, like a CTO, a CPO, these all come through like strategically well-known paths. You do this role, then this role, then this one, this role, blah, 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 right? CISOs just seem to appear. And I don't think we have the eloquence or the elegance to sit at the ELT a lot of the time. Like a lot of the time we sit there and we can't speak business. Like to your point, we've had it already, right? We should be able to saying, this is what I give the business. This is how I enable revenue. This is how I protect customer churn. This is how I help us develop strategic offerings. This is how I'm helping the business grow and go forward, whatever that growth looks like, whether it's tech or not. But most of the time you're finding a CISO saying, this is the hypothetical risk I protected you against. Like this is the money I need to be able to protect against this future hypothetical risk, right? It's very hard as a CEO to say, I'm going to give you $100,000 to protect against a risk that may never happen. And then I'll pat you on the back for protecting you against a risk which didn't happen. Like we've got CISOs just aren't good. That often they don't deserve their seat. And I say that myself, I've had to learn business. It's been the most lessons I've learned. I've spent in the go-to-market functions as a field CISO and helping go-to-market and understanding how business really works. So I can sit at the table and speak about strategy, which isn't just protection deny, and stop. Because that's generally what CISOs have as a word in the boardroom, and that can't be what we speak about, or else we're completely pointless. Why we're there.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is it really, I agree. I mean, it's a transformation of, it's really a business role as opposed to a technologist role. You're the leader of a business unit within an organization. And like any leader, if you want to be at the ELT or report to the CEO or some way have input into strategy of the business, then you're going to have to elevate your conversation. And I like you, I learned traveling around, speaking to a lot of customers, prospects, speaking at events, and interacting with a lot of CEOs and other CISOs. If you're trying to benefit the business, you don't have a choice. You actually have to learn what it means for that business to be successful and what their strategy is. And then you're overlaying, okay, how do I spend the money? The one thing I'd always say as well is being really transparent on what you're able to do for the budget you have and what you're not able to get to, and allow that conversation to take place with your leader or with other executives and sponsors in the business. Because ultimately, what I think might be important or want to get to and reduce risk is great, but it could be I spend a little bit less on that and a little bit more over here, and that one shift is enough to propel the business further forward. And you may not have known that unless you'd had the business level conversation. Um, I love to talk about strategy with people, because I think, and it depends on the organization, the size of the organization and stuff, but I think a lot of enterprise organizations get the strategy wrong because they're so focused on spending money in all these different program areas. They've done a science course, they learned about the top 10, and then they're like, okay, I need to spin up a program about this. And that shit at the end of it is just me seeing people throw money down the pan. They end up with more tools. So tool sprawl for me was another one. I'm like, companies spend so much money on tools, they don't deploy them properly, then they don't reduce the risk, and all they're doing is throwing money down the tube.
And I think that's one of the blessings and curses of spending a lot of time in startup and growth companies I have, is like, you don't have crazy budgets for tools. I can submit it every year, but I'm guaranteeing it's getting half by the time it actually gets like agreed and signed off. So it's more about them thinking, how do I actually focus on building security-centric culture? How do I focus on building processes that work? And how do I focus on making robust strategy decisions? So like, what am I going to do that's going to get me to what the CEO's priority or what good looks like is in the most simple and cost-efficient way? It might be the most elegant, it might be the most high-tech, but it'll get us there, right? And that's always where it comes back to. And in different companies, we have different priorities. We have to demonstrate different things. If you look at like now, I'm in a GRC company. So right now we have to demonstrate best-in-class GRC, right? We can't sell a product and be crap at our own business. I came from Wistic, which is a vendor risk management tool. We had to demonstrate best-in-class vendor risk. Whereas at Anecdotes, that's less important. We just need to make sure we do enough in vendor risk. Wistic, we need to do enough in GRC to sell, right? So where you are and the emphasis upon where you focus your resource and the strategic decisions you make depends on what you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to be ideologically as a business and as a security function.
And I think most CISOs, if they're not already, they should be thinking about their role in the sales cycle being, how do they demonstrate, if certainly if they're a product company, but most CISOs I know, like their team, and we would do this at Adobe and Cisco, we'd have our people at conferences doing talks on the cool shit that we're doing internally. At Cisco, I mean, when we deployed Cisco's own technology, we're sharing with customers and prospects like how we deploy the technology, how we automate, how we integrate. Like, what does that internal team do? And then a startup like you and I is the same, but I think the stakes are higher. Like you got to be like you being your customer zero. We ran the customer zero program at Banyan, so it was great for us to show people how we deploy the technology internally, how we leveraged it as part of doing audit and compliance work, because we used that for a lot of the evidence. We automated a lot of it. So I think that kind of ability to show the internal workings of your team is fun. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy it because I think a lot of CISOs, they don't like talking to a lot of them that are really tech heavy. They don't like talking to a lot of people. And I've worked a lot with them, and hats off to them for their tech genius and shit. But the reality for me personally, I enjoy going out there and meeting other CISOs. I enjoy that network, and I enjoy hearing how they're successful and sharing, the successes or the lessons learned. Now, we're kind of up on time, Jake. If you're going to leave the audience with one little takeaway, one lesson you think they should learn from all your years of wisdom, what would that be?
Well, it's one of those things where you should prepare in advance and think of something insightful. But I think, look, it's a bit of a cliched phrase on T-shirts, but let me give it some context. I think it's being uncomfortable and being happy. Like people say, get comfortable being uncomfortable, but I think it's more than that. I think it's be happy being uncomfortable. I think if you want to succeed particularly in tech and in cyber, our role gets broader and broader and broader every year. And our knowledge can't get deeper and deeper or wider and wider. So you have to get not just comfortable, but happy being comfortable. And then find ways to be creative and solve problems. I think that's the key. If people are willing to kind of put themselves in places that feel completely out of their depth and flourish there, not survive, but thrive, then I think that's the biggest lesson you have is make yourself or develop that skill set that says that I'm comfortable looking at something I don't understand that looks horrendous and just working through it step by step and solving that problem to deliver whatever that business outcome is at the end.
That's excellent. Thanks, Jake. And look, I really appreciate you staying up. Not staying up late. It's not too late.
Not quite bedtime yet.
It's not even 6 o'clock yet, but it looks, I mean, God, man, go back to how dark it is outside. It looks late, But yeah, I truly appreciate your time. Thank you very much, sir. Can't wait to see you in person one day in the future. Hopefully you're back stateside at some point soon. Maybe some security conference, I'm sure.
Whereabouts are you based then, specifically in California?
Oh yeah, San Jose.
Okay, I'm back in RSA probably. I'm in LA in February, but a bit far south.
Oh yeah. Well, I was meant to be in LA next week. We're going to be there in March due to their fires and stuff. So it's crazy what's going on down there at the moment.
Definitely.
But yeah. RSA, DevCon, Black Hat, all the usual places with the usual suspects. So hopefully we can catch up. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Folks, if you like the show, please like, subscribe, and also, plug for Jake's show because I've been listening to this one. So Risking It All podcast. We'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. Jake, thank you very much, man.
Thanks for having me. Been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Cyber909. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and don't miss an episode of your source for wit and wisdom in cybersecurity.